Hi, in this tutorial we're going to look at how to do a basic animation using a graphic and an NSTimer class. So here's the example. We're going to have a little skateboarding graphic that is going to skate across the view, and when she gets to the end she's going to start going back the other way rather than going off the screen. We're also going to learn how to set up the app so that when it loads, it's going to default to loading in landscape view, so that this will only work in either landscape left or landscape right. So to get started, I'm going to create a new project. So I'm going to make a single view application and choose next. And I'm going to call this skate animation. And I'm just going to have automatic reference counting checked off, and I'm going to save. Okay, so to begin with, we're going to set this up so that it's only going to be for landscape left or landscape right. So I'm going to take off the portrait supported device orientation, and I'm going to go into the view controller M file, and in here is where we have the should auto rotate to interface orientation. So we're going to change this so that it is equal to orientation portrait. I'm going to change portrait upside down to landscape left, right? And we'll have or interface orientation equal to UI interface orientation landscape right. And so that should force it to automatically display in landscape mode. So let's try running that in the simulator. Okay, and it automatically loads up. Even in the simulator is automatically turned to landscape mode. So that part works. Next, I'm going to go in and set up my user interface. Now, even though I've set it up to be landscape, my interface builder file doesn't automatically change to landscape. So I'm going to make sure the view is selected and change the orientation to landscape. And now I'm just going to update the color. I'm going to put in a black background, and I'm going to add an image view. So I'm going to add a UI image view, and I'm going to size it down a bit. And I'm going to add my graphic in. So I'm going to take my skateboarder image that I have on my desktop, and I'm just going to drag it into the supporting files folder. And I'm going to make sure copy items is selected and click finish. And now with my UI image view selected, I can come up here and select my skateboarder. Now she looks a little distorted, so I'm going to choose, instead of scale to fill, I'm going to choose aspect fit. And that generally gives you the best proportion for your image. It shows it in a normal proportion. So I'm just going to position her on the screen. And next I'm going to come in and I'm going to open up the assistant editor, and I'm going to begin by creating an outlet for our image. So I'm just going to make sure that my image is selected, and I'm going to right click and drag, and this is going to be called, I'm going to call this outlet Skater and Connect. So now we'll be able to reference our image by using the image view Skater. Okay, next I'm going to work some more in the header file, but I'm going to switch back into the standard editor because we have some additional setup to do in the header file. I'm going to define a few things that we're going to need, including CG point delta. We're also going to use an NSTimer object, and we're also going to have a float called skater width. Now our CG point called delta is going to handle moving our image so many pixels or so many points horizontally and so many points vertically. So we'll be setting this up in our implementation file in a minute. As I said, we're going to have a timer object. The timer object is going to handle how long it will take before it moves from one point to another. And then we're going to use a float in order to find out the width of the skater and do a little bit of configuring to figure out, okay, how big the skater is and keep it within the bounds of the screen. So we're defining these variables here, and then we'll be able to use them in our implementation file. So I'm going to switch to the implementation file, and I'm going to paste in a method in here and then describe the content. Okay, we have a method called onTimer, and when the timer runs, what we're going to do is check the skater, and we're going to get the center point of the skater. And that's going to be equal to a CG Core Graphics point make. And we find the center of the skater by saying, okay, the skater center X plus delta X. In other words, the position of where it is on the screen. Now we haven't defined delta yet, so we'll get to that in a second. And then we're also going to find out the center of it by skater center Y plus delta Y. Then we have an if statement to check to see if it's within the bounds of the screen, and another check to see if it's in the bounds of the screen height-wise. So we do that by getting the center of the skater and the size of our screen minus the width of the skater. So if we're in the bounds of the view horizontally, which is the X, and if the skater center Y is within the bounds, then it's going to, oh, this should be Y, but since my skater was only moving horizontally, this didn't really have any impact on it. So this is getting the size of the screen, and we're subtracting the width of our skater image. And we're doing the same thing for finding out the height of our skater image and the height of the screen. And then we're going to say delta X equals minus delta X. We're going to move it, but we haven't specified what delta is yet, and that's where we determine how far or how many points over it should move, and then how many points up and down it should move. So next I'm going to set up the viewDidLoad method, and again I'm going to add a little bit of code in here, and then we're going to go over it. It's faster than me typing it out for you. Okay, so up here we're using skater width, but we haven't had anything set up for it yet. So we're setting up skater width equal to the skater bounds, the size of the skater, and the width divided by 2. So we're taking the entire width of the image, dividing it by 2. We're also defining delta. Now delta is how far it's moving, and we have Core Graphics point make, and this is X and this is Y. So in my example, my skateboarder was moving 12 points at a time each time the timer updated, and it was only moving horizontally. If I wanted it to move vertically, then I could put in a point in here. And we have our timer object. We have a new timer with a scheduled interval, and this is set up for the number of seconds. So right now it's 1 second. So every second it's going to update and make the animation move delta X minus delta X and delta Y minus delta Y. And that information's coming from here. And we have repeats, yes, so every second it's going to continue to run over and over again. So let's test this and see what happens. Run it on the simulator. Okay, she's moving 1 second at a time. And I had 1 pixel or 1 point where she is moving down gradually. But when she gets to the end, then she should bounce back and start going the other direction. And there we go. Now she's moving 12 points at a time, so if I wanted this to move faster, I could come back in here and say, let's make this 20. And if I wanted a larger change in vertical change, we'll make this 5, and then we'll run it again. Okay, now the animation was slow and it was choppy, and that's because this is set up to update every 1 second. So if we wanted this to go faster, we can change this to something like 0.05. So now let's try running this and see if the animation runs faster. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so that is a basic example of doing an animation with a single image on a timer and also keeping it within the bounds of the screen.